The morning sun barely broke through the gray clouds as Dr. Elena Martinez pushed through the heavy doors of Metropolitan General Hospital. It was her first official week as a neurologist, and the excitement she had felt during residency was now mixed with genuine nervousness. The sterile smell of disinfectant filled her nose as she walked down the long corridor toward the long-term care unit on the 4th floor. Elena had dreamed of this moment for years. All those sleepless nights studying, all those grueling exams, and all those difficult cases during her training had led her here, but nothing quite prepared her for what she was about to face. The long-term care unit wasn't like the emergency room with its constant buzz of activity and dramatic saves. This was different, quieter, sadder in many ways. Her supervisor, Dr. Harrison, was a tall man in his late 50s with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too many hopeless cases. He walked her through the unit that first morning, introducing her to patients who couldn't introduce themselves. Most of them had been there for months, some even years. Their families visited less and less as time went on. Hope had a way of fading in places like this. "This will be your primary case," Dr. Harrison said, stopping outside room 427. He handed her a thick medical file that looked like it had been reviewed 100 times. "Richard Thornton, 52 years old, real estate developer, very successful, very wealthy. He's been in a coma for 8 months now following a severe car accident on the interstate." Elena flipped through the file as they stood in the hallway. The details were grim: traumatic brain injury, multiple surgeries, induced coma initially, but he never woke up even after they tried to bring him back. The brain scans showed activity, but not enough. Not the kind that suggested he would ever open his eyes again. "What's his prognosis?" Elena asked, though she could already guess the answer from the way Dr. Harrison's shoulders sagged slightly. "Not good. We've consulted with every specialist in the city. Most agree that his chances of meaningful recovery are essentially zero. We're keeping him comfortable, maintaining his vitals, but—" He trailed off, letting the silence finish his sentence. "His wife has been discussing options for long-term placement. Honestly, Elena, don't get too attached to this one. I know you're new and optimistic, but some battles can't be won." Elena nodded, but something in her chest tightened. She had gone into medicine because she believed in fighting for people, not giving up on them. When she finally stepped into room 427, she wasn't sure what she expected. The room was clean and organized, almost painfully so. Medical equipment beeped steadily, monitors displayed vital signs in green and blue lines, and in the center of it all lay Richard Thornton. He looked smaller than she had imagined for someone who had apparently built a real estate empire. His face was peaceful but empty, like a house with no one home. The nurse on duty, a woman named Betty who had worked in the unit for 15 years, was adjusting his IV line. She barely looked up when Elena entered. "Same as always," Betty said without being asked. "Vitals stable, no changes. Never any changes with this one." Elena approached the bed slowly. Richard's hair had grown longer during his time here, and someone had combed it neatly. His hands lay at his sides, pale and still. She picked up his chart from the end of the bed and began reading through the daily notes. The entries were repetitive, almost copy and paste. No response to stimuli, no change in condition. Continue current treatment protocol. "Does he get many visitors?" Elena asked. Betty finished with the IV and shrugged. "Wife comes by maybe once a week. Stays for 10 minutes. There's a daughter overseas who hasn't visited at all. Some business associates came by in the first month, but you know how that goes. People move on. Life doesn't stop just because his did." The words stung. Though Betty hadn't meant them cruelly, it was just the reality of this place. Elena looked down at Richard's face again. Somewhere in there, was he aware? Could he hear them talking about him like he was already gone? The thought made her stomach turn. She spent the rest of that first day reviewing Richard's complete medical history. Every scan, every test result, every doctor's note from the past 8 months. By the time she left the hospital that evening, her eyes hurt from staring at computer screens, but she felt like she was starting to understand the full picture of his case. That night, lying in bed next to her boyfriend David, Elena couldn't stop thinking about room 427. David worked in marketing and couldn't quite understand her obsession with her cases, but he tried to be supportive. "You're thinking about work again," he said, not unkindly. "I can tell by the way you're staring at the ceiling." "There's a patient," Elena began. "He's been in a coma for 8 months. Everyone's given up on him." "And you want to be the hero who saves him?" David asked. There was a slight edge to his voice. "I want to make sure we've tried everything," Elena said quietly. "That's all." The next morning, Elena arrived at the hospital an hour early. She went straight to room 427 and pulled up a chair beside Richard's bed. The room was dim, just the glow from the monitors and the weak morning light filtering through the blinds. "Good morning, Richard," she said softly, feeling slightly foolish but pushing through it. "My name is Dr. Martinez, but you can call me Elena. I'm going to be taking care of you now." She paused, half expecting some kind of response, but of course there was none. Just the steady beep of the heart monitor. "I read your file. I know you built your company from nothing. Started with one property and turned it into something impressive. That takes determination. That takes fight." She leaned forward slightly. "I need you to keep fighting now. Can you do that for me?" Still nothing. But Elena felt something shift inside her, a determination she hadn't quite expected. She wasn't going to treat Richard like he was already gone. She wasn't going to give up on him just because it was easier or more realistic. Over the next few days, Elena began implementing small changes to Richard's care. She asked the nurses to open his blinds during the day so natural light could fill the room. She started playing soft music during her morning rounds, just instrumental pieces at first. She talked to him about the weather, about hospital gossip, about anything that came to mind. The other doctors noticed. She could see them exchanging glances when she spent extra time in room 427. Dr. Harrison pulled her aside on Friday afternoon. "Elena, I appreciate your dedication, but you need to manage your time efficiently. You have other patients who can actually benefit from your care." "I understand," Elena said. "But what if there's something we're missing? What if he can hear us and we're just treating him like he's not there, Doctor?" Harrison's expression softened slightly. "I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen maybe 2 people wake up from comas this deep, and they were never the same. I know it's hard to accept, especially when you're starting out. But sometimes, the kindest thing we can do is acknowledge when we can't win." But Elena couldn't accept that. Not yet. Not until she had tried everything. As she left the hospital that evening, she made a decision. She was going to find a way to reach Richard Thornton, even if everyone thought she was wasting her time. Because somewhere in that silent body was a man who had built an empire. Somewhere in there was a fighter, and fighters deserved someone who wouldn't give up on them. 3 weeks had passed since Elena first walked into Richard Thornton's room, and the whispers in the hospital had grown louder. She could feel the eyes of other staff members following her as she made her way to the 4th floor each morning, her arms often filled with unusual items that had nothing to do with traditional medicine. Today it was a portable speaker, and her phone loaded with classical music. Last week she had brought in lavender oil and photographs she had requested from Richard's office. The nurses thought she was odd. The other doctors thought she was naive. Dr. Harrison thought she was wasting valuable time and resources. "Dr. Martinez, may I have a word?" Dr. Harrison's voice stopped her just outside room 427. His tone was professional but firm, the kind that meant this wasn't really a request. They stepped into an empty consultation room. Dr. Harrison closed the door and crossed his arms. He looked more tired than usual, the lines around his eyes deeper. "Elena, I've been patient with your unconventional approach, but I'm getting complaints from the nursing staff. You're disrupting their routines, and frankly, you're spending far too much time on a patient who cannot benefit from these efforts." Elena set down the speaker and met his gaze. "With respect, sir, how do we know he can't benefit? His brain activity shows he's not brain dead. What if he's in there, trapped, and we're the only connection he has to the outside world?" "That's not how comas work, Doctor," Harrison said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "You're a good doctor, Elena, but you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. This obsession isn't healthy, for you or for him." The word obsession stung because part of her knew it was true. She was thinking about Richard constantly. During lunch breaks, she researched coma cases and recovery stories. At night, she lay awake wondering what music he might have loved or what memories might still be alive somewhere in his mind. "Give me 2 more months," Elena said quietly. "If there's no improvement by then, I'll accept your assessment, but please let me try." Dr. Harrison sighed heavily. 2 months. But you need to maintain your other responsibilities. This hospital has other patients who need you. Elena nodded, relief flooding through her. "Thank you." Back in room 427, she set up the speaker on the small table beside Richard's bed. Betty was checking his vital signs and rolled her eyes when she saw the music player. "You really think Mozart is going to wake him up?" Betty asked, not unkindly. She had softened toward Elena over the past weeks, even if she didn't understand her methods. "Maybe not," Elena admitted, pulling up her usual chair. "But it can't hurt to try. I read in his business profile that he used to attend symphony performances. His assistant mentioned he had season tickets." Betty finished her checks and paused at the door. "You know his wife was here yesterday evening. You just missed her. How did she seem?" Elena asked. "Same as always. Distant." She sat in that chair for maybe 5 minutes, didn't say a word to him, just stared at her phone. Then she left. Betty shook her head. "I've seen a lot of families go through this. Some people just can't handle it. They check out emotionally to protect themselves." After Betty left, Elena pressed play on the speaker. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata filled the room, soft and melancholic. She watched Richard's face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition, any tiny movement. Nothing obvious appeared, but she had learned to look deeper. She checked the monitors. His heart rate had changed just slightly. 2 beats per minute faster than baseline. "You hear that, don't you?" she whispered, leaning closer. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" She spent the next hour rotating through different pieces of classical music, documenting every subtle change in his vitals. A spike here, a dip there, small enough that most people would dismiss them as normal variation. But Elena was building a map. She was learning Richard's responses. That evening, as she was preparing to leave, a woman in an expensive coat entered the room. She was probably in her late 40s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and makeup that looked professionally done. Everything about her screamed wealth and careful maintenance. "You must be the new doctor," the woman said coolly. "Victoria Thornton, Richard's wife." Elena stood up quickly, extending her hand. "Dr. Martinez, it's good to finally meet you." Victoria's handshake was brief and limp. She didn't move closer to the bed, staying near the doorway as if the room might contaminate her. "I've heard about your methods," Victoria said, glancing at the speaker, the photographs on the wall, the small diffuser Elena had plugged in. "Playing music, talking to him like he's listening. It's very sweet, doctor. Very optimistic." There was something sharp hidden in those words. Elena felt herself tense. "I believe stimulation can help," Elena said carefully. "Even if he can't respond, his brain might still be processing information." Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Richard spent 40 years processing information, doctor. Look where it got him, lying in a hospital bed, breathing through tubes while his company falls apart and his assets get frozen in legal limbo." The bitterness in her voice was startling. Elena had imagined a grieving wife, someone hoping for a miracle. This was something else entirely. "Mrs. Thornton, I understand this must be incredibly difficult." "Do you?" Victoria interrupted. "Do you understand what it's like to watch your life crumble because your husband decided to drive home drunk after a business dinner? Do you know what it's like to be in limbo? Unable to move forward because he's not quite dead but not really alive either." The words hung in the air like poison. Elena didn't know how to respond. Victoria took a deep breath, composing herself. When she spoke again, her voice was calmer but no less cold. "I'm meeting with the hospital board next month to discuss long-term care options. Richard has excellent insurance, and there are facilities that specialize in this type of case. Places where he can receive basic care without taking up space in an acute hospital. But what if he wakes up?" Elena asked, unable to stop herself. "He won't," Victoria said flatly. She finally looked at her husband, and for just a moment something soft crossed her face. Sadness, maybe, or regret. The Richard that I married died in that accident. This is just his body running on autopilot. The sooner everyone accepts that, the better. She turned to leave but paused at the door. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, doctor. I really do. But you're young. You still think medicine can fix everything. Some things are just broken beyond repair. You'll learn that eventually. After Victoria left, Elena sat in the quiet room, shaken. The classical music had ended and she hadn't noticed. She looked at Richard, lying there so still, and felt a surge of anger on his behalf. "She's wrong," Elena said firmly. "You're not broken beyond repair." I don't believe that, but doubt had crept in. What if everyone was right? What if she was just a naive young doctor who couldn't accept defeat? What if her efforts were pointless? Her phone buzzed. A text from David. "Late again? We had dinner plans, remember?" Elena cursed under her breath. She had completely forgotten. This was the third time this month. She quickly texted back an apology and promised to be home soon. As she gathered her things, she noticed something on Richard's bedside table that hadn't been there before. A business card. She picked it up. Riverside Extended Care Facility, specializing in long-term coma patients. Victoria must have left it. A message. A reminder that Elena's time was running out. That night, David was cold when she got home. He had ordered takeout, but most of it sat uneaten on the coffee table. "I'm sorry," Elena said, meaning it. "I lost track of time." "You're always losing track of time," David said. "This patient, this coma patient, he's all you talk about. He's all you think about. I'm starting to feel like I'm competing with a man who isn't even conscious." "That's not fair," Elena protested. "Isn't it?" David stood up, frustration clear on his face. "Elena, I love you. I support your career. But this isn't normal. You're obsessed with someone you can't save, and it's taking over your entire life. When was the last time we had a real conversation that didn't involve you talking about brainwaves and music therapy?" Elena opened her mouth to argue but couldn't find the words. He was right. She knew he was right. "I just need a little more time," she said weakly. "I'm onto something." "I know I am," David shook his head sadly. "That's what scares me. You're so convinced you're going to be the hero in this story that you can't see what it's costing you." He went to bed early, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and her doubts. She pulled out her laptop and opened her research files on Richard's case. Pages and pages of notes, charts, observations. She had documented every tiny change, every possible sign of awareness. Was it enough, or was she just seeing what she wanted to see? Elena didn't have the answer. But she knew one thing. She couldn't give up, not yet. Not while there was still a chance, however small, that Richard Thornton was fighting to come back to a world that had already moved on without him. 6 weeks into Elena's treatment plan, something changed. It was a Tuesday morning, unremarkable in every way except for what happened in room 427. Elena was doing her usual routine, talking to Richard about the sunrise she had seen on her drive to work. The sky had been painted in shades of orange and pink, and she was describing it in detail, trying to paint the picture with her words. "The clouds looked like they were on fire," she said softly, adjusting the pillow behind his head. "It reminded me why I love this city, even with all its problems. There's still beauty if you know where to look." That's when it happened. A movement so small she almost missed it. Richard's left index finger twitched, just once. A tiny flutter of motion that lasted maybe half a second. Elena froze, her heart suddenly pounding. She stared at his hand, willing it to move again. Nothing. Had she imagined it? She looked up at the monitors. His heart rate had jumped slightly. Not much, but enough to notice. "Richard," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "Can you hear me? If you can hear me, try to move your finger again." She waited, counting the seconds in her head. 10, 20, 30. Nothing happened. But she had seen it. She was certain she had seen it. Elena rushed to the door and called for Betty, who was at the nurse's station down the hall. The older nurse came quickly, concern on her face. "What's wrong?" Betty asked. "His finger moved," Elena said breathlessly. "I saw it, his left index finger. It twitched." Betty walked over to the bed and looked at Richard's hand. She gently picked it up, checking for any sign of movement or tension. "I don't see anything, honey." "Are you sure?" "I know what I saw," Elena insisted. She felt a flash of frustration. Why didn't anyone believe her? Betty's expression was kind but skeptical. Sometimes our eyes play tricks on us, especially when we want something badly enough. "These patients have muscle spasms all the time. It doesn't mean anything." "This was different," Elena said, but even as she spoke, doubt crept in. Had it really been different? Or was Betty right? Was she seeing what she wanted to see? After Betty left, Elena sat down heavily in her chair. She pulled out her phone and made a note with the exact time and what she had observed. She had been documenting everything, building a case, collecting evidence. But evidence only mattered if other people saw it too. The rest of the day dragged by. Elena checked on Richard every hour, hoping to see another sign, another movement. Nothing came. By evening, she was exhausted and doubting herself. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was too emotionally invested. Maybe she was losing her objectivity. She was about to leave when an unexpected visitor arrived. A young woman in her late 20s, wearing jeans and a travel-worn jacket, stood in the doorway of room 427. She had Richard's eyes. The same deep brown color, the same shape. "You must be Dr. Martinez," the woman said. Her accent was British, refined. "I'm Sophie." "Richard's daughter." Elena stood up quickly. "Sophie, I didn't know you were coming." "Neither did Victoria, I imagine," Sophie said with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She moved closer to the bed, and Elena saw her composure crack just a little. God, he looked so different. Smaller somehow. "When did you arrive?" Elena asked gently. "This morning. I got the call from the hospital administrator about the meeting next month. About moving him to another facility." Sophie's jaw tightened. "I haven't seen my father in 3 years. We had a falling out. Stupid family drama that seemed so important at the time. And now look at him." She reached out and touched Richard's hand, the same hand that had twitched earlier. Elena watched carefully but saw no response. "The nurses said you've been spending a lot of time with him," Sophie continued. "Talking to him, playing music. Victoria thinks you're wasting your time." "What do you think?" Elena asked. Sophie was quiet for a moment. "I think my father spent most of his life building walls. He was brilliant at business but terrible at letting people in. My mother died when I was 12, and after that he just shut down emotionally, threw himself into work. When I tried to talk to him about real things, important things, it was like talking to a stranger." She paused, her voice catching. "But that doesn't mean I stopped loving him. And it doesn't mean he deserves to be given up on." Elena felt a surge of connection with this woman she had just met. Finally, someone who understood. "I saw something today," Elena said carefully. His finger moved. "Just a small twitch, but I'm certain I saw it." Sophie's eyes widened. "Did anyone else see it?" "No. The nurse thinks I imagined it or that it was just a muscle spasm." "But you don't think so," Sophie said. It wasn't a question. "No, I don't." Sophie pulled up another chair and sat down on the opposite side of the bed. "Tell me about your treatment plan. Tell me everything you've been doing." For the next hour, Elena explained her approach. The music, the conversation, the sensory stimulation. She showed Sophie her notes, the charts tracking Richard's subtle responses. Sophie listened intently, asking smart questions, absorbing every detail. "There's something you should know about my father," Sophie said finally. "Something that might help. When he was 16, his older brother died in a car accident. My father was driving. He survived, but Andrew didn't. He never talked about it, but my grandmother told me years later. She said he blamed himself, said he carried that guilt his entire life." Elena's mind raced. That could be significant. Trauma like that, especially unresolved trauma, can create psychological barriers. "You think that's why he's not waking up?" Sophie asked. "Some kind of subconscious guilt keeping him trapped?" "It's possible," Elena said. "Comas aren't always just physical. The mind can play a role in recovery. If part of him feels like he doesn't deserve to wake up, doesn't deserve to survive when his brother didn't..." Sophie nodded slowly. "That would be exactly like him, punishing himself for something that happened decades ago." They sat in silence for a moment, both looking at Richard's still face. Then Sophie spoke again, her voice softer. "There's more. My father and I fought about his drinking. He had been getting worse over the past few years. That's why I left, why I moved to London. I couldn't watch him destroy himself. And now I find out he was drunk when he crashed. Victoria told me on the phone," her voice broke. "I should have stayed. I should have tried harder to help him." "You can't blame yourself," Elena said. "Why not?" "He's lying here because I wasn't there to stop him from getting behind that wheel." Elena reached across the bed and touched Sophie's arm. "Your father made his own choices. You can't control someone else's decisions no matter how much you love them." Sophie wiped her eyes. "So what do we do now? How do we reach him?" "We keep trying," Elena said. "We talk to him about his brother, about forgiveness, about second chances. We make him understand that it's okay to come back." "You really think that will work?" Sophie asked. "Honestly, I don't know. But I've learned that medicine isn't always about what we know. Sometimes it's about what we believe is possible. Over the next week, Sophie became a constant presence in room 427. She took a leave from her job in London and stayed at a hotel near the hospital. Together, she and Elena developed a new approach. Sophie brought photos of Andrew, Richard's brother. She found old home videos and played them on a laptop in the room. She talked about memories, about the good times before the accident. "Dad, I know you can hear me," Sophie said one afternoon while Elena took notes. "I know you've been carrying this guilt for so long. But Andrew wouldn't want this. He wouldn't want you to punish yourself forever. I need you to forgive yourself. I need you to come back." Elena watched the monitors closely. Richard's heart rate increased more than usual. His blood pressure rose slightly. These weren't random fluctuations. They were responses. She was sure of it. Dr. Harrison stopped by that evening and found both women in the room. He looked at the photos on the walls, the laptop still playing old family videos, and shook his head. "Dr. Martinez, this is highly irregular. You're turning this room into some kind of therapy session." "It's working," Elena said firmly. "Look at these readings." His responses are getting stronger. Dr. Harrison studied the chart she handed him. "These variations are within normal range. You're reading patterns into random data." "They're not random," Sophie interjected. "I've been watching too. When I talk about specific memories, his vitals change. When I mention his brother's name, there's always a response." "Confirmation bias," Dr. Harrison said, but he sounded less certain than before. "You're both seeing what you want to see." "Then observe him yourself," Elena challenged. "Spend an hour in here. Watch what happens when Sophie talks to him. Make your own assessment." Dr. Harrison looked at her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. 1 hour. Tomorrow morning. "But Elena, if I don't see anything compelling, this ends. The board meeting is in 2 weeks. Mrs. Thornton is pushing hard for the transfer. I can't keep defending your methods if there are no measurable results." After he left, Sophie turned to Elena. "What if he doesn't see anything tomorrow? What if my father doesn't respond?" Elena looked at Richard lying there so still. "Then we make sure he does. We'll talk about everything important, everything that might reach him. We only have one chance to prove this is working." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay awake, running through possibilities, planning what to say. What approach might finally break through? Beside her, David slept, but the distance between them felt like miles. He had stopped asking about her day. She had stopped sharing. Tomorrow would determine everything. Either she would prove that Richard was fighting to come back, or she would have to accept defeat. And accepting defeat meant watching a man she had come to care about get shipped away to spend whatever remained of his life in a warehouse for the forgotten. Elena stared at the ceiling and made a silent promise. Tomorrow she would find a way to reach Richard Thornton, whatever it took, because fighters deserved someone who wouldn't give up on them, even when all the evidence said they should. The morning of Dr. Harrison's observation arrived with gray skies and a heavy feeling in Elena's chest. She had barely slept, running through scenarios in her mind, preparing for what might be her last chance to prove Richard could recover. Sophie met her outside room 427 at 7 in the morning, looking just as exhausted. "Ready?" Sophie asked, clutching a worn photo album she had brought from her father's house. "As ready as I'll ever be," Elena replied, though her hands were shaking slightly. Dr. Harrison arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, punctual as always. He brought another neurologist with him, Dr. Chen, a woman in her 40s known for her no-nonsense approach to medicine. Elena's heart sank a little. Dr. Harrison wasn't just observing. He was bringing a witness, someone to back up his assessment. "Ladies," Dr. Harrison said formally, "Dr. Chen will be joining us this morning. I want an objective second opinion on what we're seeing here." They all entered the room. Richard lay as he always did, peaceful and still. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across his bed. Elena took her usual position on one side while Sophie sat on the other. The two doctors stood at the foot of the bed, clipboards ready. "Proceed as you normally would," Dr. Harrison instructed. "Pretend we're not here." Elena took a deep breath and nodded to Sophie. They had planned this carefully. Sophie would do most of the talking today, speaking about things only a daughter would know. Memories that might reach deeper than anything Elena could say. Sophie opened the photo album with trembling hands. "Dad, I brought something to show you. Remember this?" She held up a faded photograph. "This is from my 8th birthday. You took me to that Italian restaurant downtown. The one with the terrible singing waiters. You hated it, but I loved it, and you sat through 2 hours of off-key opera just to make me happy. Elena watched the monitors. Richard's heart rate was steady. No change yet, Sophie continued, turning pages. And this one. This is from the last vacation we took as a family, before Mom got sick. We went to the lake house. You taught me how to fish that summer. I never told you, but I hated fishing. I thought it was boring. But I loved spending time with you. Those quiet mornings on the dock, just the two of us, those were some of the best moments of my childhood. A slight increase in heart rate. Just 3 beats per minute, but Elena saw it. She glanced at the doctors. Dr. Harrison was watching the monitors too, his expression unreadable. Sophie's voice grew softer, more emotional. I know we haven't talked in 3 years. I know I left angry, said things I didn't mean. I told you I was done, that I couldn't watch you destroy yourself anymore. But I never stopped loving you, Dad. Not for a single day. Richard's blood pressure ticked up slightly. Dr. Chen made a note on her clipboard. Then Sophie pulled out another photograph, older and more faded than the rest. I found this at the house. It's Andrew, your brother. Grandma gave it to me before she died. She told me what happened, Dad. She told me about the accident, about how you blamed yourself all these years. The change was immediate. Richard's heart rate jumped noticeably. His blood pressure rose. Even his breathing pattern shifted slightly on the ventilator. Dr. Harrison leaned forward, studying the monitors more closely. Sophie kept talking, tears streaming down her face now. She told me you were just a kid, 16 years old. It wasn't your fault, Dad. The other driver ran the red light. You didn't kill Andrew. It was an accident. A terrible, horrible accident. But it wasn't your fault. More changes. Stronger this time. Richard's fingers twitched, both hands this time, not just one. Elena's pulse raced. This was it. This was what she had been waiting for. You've been punishing yourself for 40 years, Sophie continued. Pushing everyone away, drowning yourself in work and whiskey. Never letting anyone close enough to really know you. And for what? Andrew wouldn't want this. He wouldn't want you to waste your life feeling guilty. He loved you, Dad. He would want you to forgive yourself. Sophie reached out and took her father's hand. I forgive you for shutting me out. I forgive you for choosing work over our relationship. I forgive you for all of it, but you need to forgive yourself. You need to let go of the guilt and come back. Please, Dad, come back to me. And then it happened, something nobody in that room expected. Richard's eyes moved beneath his closed lids. Rapid eye movement, clear and unmistakable. Then his hand, the one Sophie was holding, squeezed. Just a little, just for a second, but everyone saw it. Dr. Chen gasped softly. Dr. Harrison moved closer to the bed, his professional demeanor cracking. Mr. Thornton, Dr. Harrison said firmly. Richard, if you can hear me, squeeze your daughter's hand again. They all held their breath. 10 seconds passed. 20. Elena thought maybe it had been a fluke, a random muscle contraction. But then it happened again. A definite squeeze, stronger this time. My God, Dr. Chen whispered. Sophie was crying openly now, gripping her father's hand like a lifeline. Dad, I'm here. I'm right here. Elena felt tears on her own cheeks. Months of doubt, months of being told she was wrong, months of fighting against everyone's skepticism, and finally, proof. But the most dramatic moment was still to come. As they all watched in stunned silence, Richard's eyelids fluttered. Once, twice. And then, slowly, impossibly, they opened. His eyes were unfocused at first, confused. The overhead lights must have been painfully bright after months of darkness. He blinked several times, his gaze wandering around the room before finally settling on Sophie's face. His lips moved, though no sound came out. He had been intubated for so long that speech would take time to return. But his eyes, those eyes Sophie had recognized the moment she walked in, were alert, aware, present. Don't try to talk, Elena said quickly, moving to check his vitals. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely read the monitors. You're in the hospital. You've been in a coma for 8 months. You're safe. You're going to be okay. Richard's eyes moved to Elena, studying her face. There was confusion there, but also something else. Recognition, maybe, or gratitude. Dr. Harrison immediately called for the medical team. Within minutes, the room filled with nurses and specialists. all working to assess Richard's condition. The breathing tube would need to come out. Tests would need to be run. There were protocols to follow, procedures to implement. But through all the chaos, Richard's eyes never left Sophie's face for long. And Sophie never let go of his hand. Elena stepped back, letting the medical team work. She felt Dr. Harrison's hand on her shoulder. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. His voice was thick with emotion. "I was wrong. You were right to keep fighting for him." Elena couldn't speak. She just nodded, watching the impossible unfold before her eyes. Dr. Chen approached them, shaking her head in disbelief. "In 20 years of neurology, I've never seen anything like this. By every measure, he should not have woken up. The extent of his injuries, the length of the coma, the lack of improvement in his scans. This is extraordinary." Over the next few hours, as Richard was stabilized and the breathing tube carefully removed, the story began to emerge. He couldn't speak much yet, his vocal cords weak from months of disuse, but he could nod and shake his head. And through yes or no questions, a picture formed. He had heard everything. Every word Elena spoke, every song she played, every story Sophie told. He described being trapped in darkness, aware but unable to respond, like being buried alive in his own body. He had heard the doctors saying he would never wake up. He had heard Victoria discussing sending him away. He had heard Sophie arrive and talk about Andrew. That's what finally broke through, he tried to explain through gestures and broken whispers. Hearing his daughter forgive him. Hearing that it was okay to let go of the guilt. Permission to come back to a world he thought he didn't deserve to be part of. Victoria arrived that evening, called by the hospital. She stood in the doorway of room 427, staring at Richard sitting up in bed, Sophie beside him, and her face went pale. "This isn't possible," she whispered. Richard looked at his wife, and something passed between them. No words were needed. They both knew their marriage had ended long before the accident. But there was no anger in his eyes, just a sad understanding. "I know," Victoria said finally, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I know we're done. But I'm glad you're awake. I'm glad you're okay." She left shortly after, and Elena suspected she wouldn't be back. Some relationships couldn't survive the weight of what had happened. That night, as Elena finally prepared to leave the hospital, Sophie caught up with her in the hallway. "Thank you," Sophie said simply. "Thank you for not giving up on him when everyone else did. Thank you for helping me reach him," Elena replied. "I couldn't have done it without you." Sophie hugged her tightly. "He wants to see you before you go. He's trying to talk. It's slow, but he's managing a few words." Elena went back to room 427. Richard was alone now, the lights dimmed. He looked exhausted, but more alive than she had ever seen him. When he saw her, he raised his hand slightly in greeting. She approached the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Thank you," he managed to whisper, his voice rough and barely audible. "You saved me. You saved yourself," Elena said. "You fought to come back." Richard shook his head slightly. "No, was giving up. Then I heard your voice, every day, telling me to fight, telling me I deserved to wake up." He paused, gathering strength. "You became my reason to keep trying." Elena felt fresh tears coming. "I'm just glad you're awake." "The music," Richard continued slowly. "The stories, everything, I heard it all. Thank you for treating me like a person, not just a body in a bed." As Elena drove home that night, she felt lighter than she had in months. David was waiting up for her, and when she told him what happened, even he couldn't help but smile. "I guess I was wrong," he admitted, "about you being obsessed. You really did save him." But Elena knew the truth. She hadn't saved Richard. She had just refused to let him face the darkness alone. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes knowing someone believes in you is enough to help you find your way back to the light. 6 months after Richard Thornton opened his eyes, Elena sat in a coffee shop across from Metropolitan General Hospital, watching the autumn leaves drift past the window. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Dad's physical therapy session went great today. He walked 50 feet without the walker. Doctor says he's progressing faster than anyone expected." Elena smiled and typed back a quick congratulations. Richard's recovery had been nothing short of remarkable, though the journey hadn't been easy. Those first weeks after he woke up were brutal. Relearning how to speak clearly, how to swallow, how to move limbs that had been still for so long. Every small victory came with frustration and pain. But Richard had fought through it all with a determination that impressed even the most skeptical doctors. The door of the coffee shop opened, and Richard himself walked in. He moved slowly, still using a cane, but he was standing on his own 2 feet. His hair had been cut properly now, and he had gained back some of the weight he had lost. He looked like a man returning to the world of the living. "I hope I'm not late," Richard said, his voice much stronger than those first whispered words months ago. He still spoke carefully, choosing his words with precision, but the roughness was mostly gone. "Right on time," Elena said, standing to greet him. "How did you get here? I thought Sophie was with you at therapy." "I took a cab," Richard said with a slight smile. "I'm trying to do more things on my own. Sophie means well, but she hovers. I think she's afraid I'll disappear again if she takes her eyes off me for too long." They sat down and Richard ordered a black coffee. Elena noticed how he held the cup with both hands, still building back his strength and coordination. "The hospital is buzzing about you," Elena said. "Dr. Harrison uses your case in every presentation now. You've become the poster child for never giving up on patients." Richard shook his head slightly. "That should be you. You're the one who wouldn't give up. Everyone else had written me off." "You did the hard part," Elena countered. "You found your way back." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Over the past months, they had developed an unusual friendship. Richard credited Elena with saving his life, and Elena saw in Richard's recovery proof that her instincts had been right. But it was more than that. They understood each other in a way that was hard to explain. "I wanted to talk to you about something," Richard said finally. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about those months I was trapped inside my own head, and about what I'm going to do with this second chance." "You don't owe anyone an explanation," Elena said gently. "You're still recovering. There's no rush to figure everything out." "But that's just it," Richard said, leaning forward. "I spent my whole life rushing, building the business, making deals, accumulating wealth and success. And for what? I pushed away my daughter. My marriage fell apart. I drank to numb the guilt about my brother. I was successful by every measure except the ones that actually matter." He paused, taking a sip of coffee. "When I was in the coma, I heard you talking to me about second chances, about how it was okay to come back, to forgive myself. And I realized something. If I got another chance at life, I didn't want to waste it on the same things that made me miserable the first time around." "What are you saying?" Elena asked. "I'm selling the company," Richard said. "My business partners have been running it without me anyway. They'll buy me out. And I'm starting a foundation, a medical research foundation focused on coma recovery and patient-centered care." Elena's eyes widened. "Richard, that's incredible. I want you to be part of it," he continued. "As a consultant, an advisor, whatever role you want. Your methods, your approach, they need to be studied and shared. How many other patients are out there right now, aware but trapped, being treated like they're already gone? How many families are being told to give up hope when there might still be a chance?" Elena felt emotion swelling in her chest. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Richard said simply. "You changed my life, Elena. Let me help you change others." Before Elena could respond, her phone rang. It was David. She hesitated, then declined the call. Things with David had gotten complicated. After Richard woke up, David had been supportive at first, proud even. But as the months went on and Elena remained deeply involved in Richard's recovery, old tensions resurfaced. The relationship that once seemed solid now felt fragile. Richard noticed her expression. "Trouble at home?" Elena sighed. "David thinks I'm too invested in my patients. He says I don't know how to separate work from life. Maybe he's right. Or maybe you're exactly the kind of doctor the world needs," Richard said. "Someone who actually cares. Someone who sees patients as people, not just cases to manage." "It's costing me my relationship, though," Elena admitted. "We barely talk anymore. When we do, we just argue about the same things over and over." Richard was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something I learned during those months of darkness? Life's too short to spend it with people who don't understand what drives you. Victoria and I stayed married for years after we should have ended it. We were comfortable, familiar, but not truly connected. The accident just forced us to finally admit what we both already knew." "Are you telling me to break up with my boyfriend?" Elena asked with a small smile. "I'm telling you that the right person will love you for your passion, not despite it. They'll understand why you fight so hard for your patients. They won't make you choose between your calling and your relationship." Elena knew he was right. She had known it for a while but hadn't wanted to admit it. Over the next few weeks, Richard's foundation began to take shape. He hired a team, secured funding, and reached out to hospitals and research institutions. The foundation's mission was simple: to study cases of coma recovery, to develop better protocols for patient care, and to ensure that no patient was given up on prematurely. Elena became the lead medical consultant, working part-time alongside her hospital duties. Dr. Harrison, who had been so skeptical at first, became one of the foundation's biggest supporters. Even Dr. Chen joined the advisory board. Sophie threw herself into the foundation work as well. She had decided to stay in the city, rebuilding her relationship with her father one day at a time. The 3 years they had lost couldn't be recovered, but they were making new memories, better ones. "He's different now," Sophie told Elena one afternoon as they reviewed grant applications. "Softer, more present. It's like the coma burned away all the walls he built up over the years. I'm getting to know a version of my father I never knew existed." "People often talk about trauma changing them," Elena said. "But rarely do we get to see someone literally come back from the edge and choose to be different." The Foundation's first major project was a research study examining the role of sensory stimulation and emotional connection in coma recovery. Hospitals across the country signed up to participate. Elena's methods, once dismissed as naive optimism, were now being studied and implemented in intensive care units nationwide. 6 months after the Foundation launched, they held their first fundraising gala. Richard, now walking without a cane, gave a speech that left hardly a dry eye in the room. 8 months of my life were spent in darkness, he told the crowd. But in that darkness, one person refused to treat me like I was already gone. Dr. Elena Martinez talked to me every day. She played music, she shared stories, she reminded me that I was still human, still worthy of care and attention. And when my daughter came and helped me finally forgive myself for mistakes I made 40 years ago, I found the strength to fight my way back. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "This foundation exists because I believe no patient should face that darkness alone. Every person in a coma, every person in a vegetative state, every person the medical system has given up on deserves someone who will fight for them, who will see them as a person, not just a body, who will refuse to give up hope." The gala raised over $2 million, but more importantly, it raised awareness. News outlets picked up the story. Medical journals requested articles. Other hospitals started implementing Elena's protocols. Elena's personal life had changed too. She and David had finally ended their relationship, a painful but necessary decision. It hurt, but she also felt lighter, free to pursue her work without guilt or constant compromise. One evening, as Elena was leaving the hospital after a particularly long shift, she found Richard waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car. "I hope this doesn't seem weird," he said, "but I wanted to ask you something and I didn't want to do it over email or at the foundation office." "Okay," Elena said, curious. "Would you have dinner with me? Not a work dinner. Not a meeting. Just dinner. 2 people sharing a meal." Elena felt her heart skip. She had been so focused on their professional relationship, on the foundation and the research, that she hadn't let herself think about the connection she felt with Richard on a personal level. "I know the age difference is significant," Richard continued quickly, "and I know I'm probably reading this all wrong. But these past months, getting to know you, working alongside you, I've realized you're not just the doctor who saved my life. You're someone I genuinely care about, someone I want to spend time with." Elena smiled. I'd like that very much." They went to a small Italian restaurant, nothing fancy, and talked for hours. Not about medicine or the foundation, but about everything else. Their childhoods, their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. It felt easy and natural in a way Elena hadn't experienced before. As Richard drove her home that night, Elena thought about how strange life was. A year ago, she had been a nervous young doctor starting her first week at a new hospital. Now she was helping run a foundation, implementing new medical protocols nationwide, and sitting beside a man who had literally come back from the dead. "Thank you for tonight," Richard said when they reached her apartment. "Thank you for asking," Elena replied. "Can we do this again?" he asked. "Definitely." As Elena walked up to her apartment, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the desperate, fighting hope she had felt during Richard's coma, but something gentler, the hope that comes from new beginnings and unexpected connections.